Well, hello everyone. We continue in our analysis, discussion, and introduction to the ritual and artistic development of Hindu art. I left you off in our last discussion with an extended consideration of the god Shiva, which I will share with you right now. So Shiva here is as Lord of the Dance. Shiva may also appear with his consort Parvati. Here is a very tender sculpture where Shiva, with his four arms, is sitting with his beloved Parvati, who is his spouse and balancing force in his life, because he is a volatile god. He is as if you are a god of both creation and destruction. It's not at all surprising. And this is also bronze, a copper alloy, and it's in Nepal. So it's in a quite different area, 11th century Nepal. And I'm not going to discuss this image at length, only to call your attention to the consort of Shiva, Parvati. And she is understood, as I've said before, as one of the many manifestations of the great mother goddess. Here, the great mother goddess is one among seven, this depiction of mother goddesses in temple architecture. Now, Shiva also appears in a most striking and for many unforgettable form of a phallus. It's known as a Shiva Linga, and this is represents the raw power of Shiva and his masculinity. Hindus believe it represents the seed of the universe, demonstrating Shiva's quality of creation. So, along with the beating drum that we had just looked at with the sacred dance of Shiva as the Lord of Dance, we also have his creative aspect very clearly articulated as a phallic image with Shiva's face sculpted onto it. This is very far north in the Kashmiri region, but we find these in the south of India as well, sometimes very large, and the center of a temple for worship. Um, Hindus worshippers of Shiva celebrate a festival known as Mahashivaratri, a festival where the Shiva Linga is bathed in water, milk, and honey and worshipped. And I think it's not something that we're used to seeing in the Western tradition, this kind of open recognition of the origins of one half of the origins of human life, the seed of the phallic image. But when we think about what we've seen in the Vedas, and we know that Shiva is earlier form was Rudra, um, the idea of this great cosmic force impregnating, so to speak, the cosmos to produce creation, as the creative aspect of Shiva makes a lot more sense. Shiva's symbolism is also linked to the crescent moon. So if you see the crescent moon, we can definitely, on a male god, it's an indication of Shiva. And his predecessor, or his former formation as Rudra, was the wild god, um, and he's very primordial. Rudra is primordial. Shiva is primordial. Primordial means before creation, the moment when whatever energy was moving to allow for that spark of creation. That's primordial. Um, And there is an entire devotion to Shiva and Shaivism, which explores um, this aspect of Shiva. Now, looking at his face, we can see the third eye of supreme wisdom here. Shiva is a figure of contrasts. He's as we saw in his sacred dance. On the one hand, he's creating, on the other, he's destroying. And in the myths, mythological structures of the Mahabharata and the Puranas and other texts, we find Shiva is struggling against two extreme sides of himself. He is at once extremely driven with lust and his sensuality, and at this, which is self-evident when, in a sense, as we're given this primordial image. But at the same time, he's also known to be a tremendous ascetic and renouncing the sensuous. And in fact, it is thought that he burned a third eye of supreme wisdom into his forehead to help him with his lustful side, that supreme wisdom would help him see. That's one of those elements that can pull the soul downward instead of upward. Okay, and of course we can see here the three stylized aesthetic lines below Shiva's face. We also see this in Buddhist and sometimes in Jain sculpture, and it continues into Chinese representations of the Buddha. We find those almond-shaped eyes that were mentioned in the treatise on beauty that I mentioned in our previous session. We have these enlarged earlobes with rings placed in this very enlarged hole that is a sign of his princely association with his princely nature. We already saw this, Parvati and Shiva and the goddess, the mother goddess. So now we're going to turn, we have the great goddess as a mother goddess, as Parvati, and other spouses of gods as well. She's the mother and spouse. The great goddess essentially is refracted into different feminine forms in the Hindu pantheon. One of her most remarkable forms is as Durga, the goddess Durga. And here we're looking at a stone schist, a very hard and granular stone, type of stone called a schist. And this is in eastern India in the area of Bihar in the 9th century. So we're going back a little bit and we're leaving Chola altogether and back up in back into stonework. And here the goddess is slaying the demon Mahisha, and let's go into more detail about what's happening. So Durga here, and now remember, she is the mother goddess turned fierce, and I think that's not unusual. Mothers protecting their children, which would be all of humanity, and the gods will turn fierce when provoked sufficiently and fears for the safety of her progeny. Durga here assumes one of the most dramatic poses for the goddess in all Indian art, which conveys to devotees the unequivocal power of the aroused Devi, meaning an infuriated goddess. And what the pose is here is a straight leg pressed to the ground with a solid foot, and then her right leg raised up and holding down the demon here, and which you can see, this is not the demon, this is the head of a lion that is actually what Durga rides, and they are friends and companions, and he serves her as her mode of transportation, if you will. But what we're looking at here at the base and I will go forward because I have a detail, I think, but just quickly, the base here is the form of a bull, and here's a decapitated bull's head at the base here. I don't know if you see what I see from my Zoom ruler that is imposing itself on my screen. Anyway, here's the head of the bull in which the demon had disguised himself, which she has triumphantly chopped off with this massive weapon, this sword, and she's pulling the actual demon from his disguise in the guise of a bull and is about to impale and destroy him while holding the demon by its hair. She's holding a chakram, which was given to her by Vishnu. So I'll just go forward. Again, the demon's name is Mahisha, or this Mahisha Maradini. Back again. And these weapons that she's holding, rope, the disc, the chakram, she is pulling from her quiver. So there's two things happening. It's not very, it may not be clear. So on her back is a quiver for a bow and arrow, and that should not be assumed to be the extension of her of this triaded forked weapon, which she's impaling the demon Mahisha with. But she is in fact with one of her 6 arms pulling from her back an arrow. And here, sorry, not one of her 6 arms, one of her 8 arms, excuse me, 8 arms, a bow here. She will then use to shoot. So imagine this 8-armed, fierce figure of battle against evil is essentially what this is an incarnation of as the mother goddess. And so let me finish the iconography. In her 8-armed form, Durga wields the might of the sword over the buffalo, which she has just decapitated. She displays the discus weapon of Vishnu, the chakram, and Shiva's forked trident. The slain, here's the detail I wanted to show you. The slain buffalo demon with Durga's lion coming in from behind. You see this is the lion's mane and the paw. He's coming in to attack or maul the buffalo. And Durga is often depicted on mounted on a lion. Now, the aesthetics of an Indian goddess, even when she's in such a ferocious form as Durga, is required to have the appearance of a girl of 16. So she's got this characteristic, very feminine, curving body, very small waist. Her straining effort of this battle where she's destroying this demon that none of the other male gods could destroy. So ultimately, it's the feminine power of the mother that is the most powerful over evil in this image. And she has her flexed stomach muscles here, and at the same time, a sensuous sense of skin of her little belly, kind of slightly protruding over her girdle here, or her belt. And like the Lord of the Dance, Vishnu, we see this wonderful exploration of the multi-armed figure with bent at the elbow to create a kind of spinning or whirling energy, which is only enhanced by her raised right leg. And where we find the anchoring and the stabilizing power of this figure is in her straight foot on the ground, and this diagonal massive sword that's echoing her thigh. These elements of the composition create a sense of her strength, her stability, her leverage as a force of nature or divine nature. And then we have, with this kind of stabilized core, these spider-like or spinning limbs with these bent elbows, which create a kind of intense motion of movement and almost a spinning drama. And this is what I meant in one of our early sessions, that we must understand Indian art and its characteristics as being one of fluidity of form. So there's a sense that things are moving from one form to another. Volumetric to some degree here, although this is a high relief sculpture. She is carved in a stele, which is a kind of stone, flat stone. And so her back view is not going to have anything other than the flat back of this stele. So this is in high relief, meaning it's not sculpted fully in the round, but even in high relief, this is a significant emphasis on volumes and forms. So I've repeated throughout these series on Indian sculpture, look for that rounded volumetric form when you look at Indian sculpture in every aspect of a depicted god, attendant to a god, a nature deity, and so forth. And look also for the sense of fluid motion moving through from one form to the next to help you absorb and um, begin to get a feeling for what Indian art, what its special visual effects and characteristics are. That said, let us end our series with this dazzling figure of the celestial dancer, which brings this discussion of volumes, sensuality, and the twisting figure in motion through a fluidity of articulation into kind of vivid clarity for we, the students of Hindu art. She is the Hindu temple itself, which is where she comes from, and she probably misses it. These days, she's in the Metropolitan Museum of Art and removed from her temple, her original context. And in her original context, it's understood that it's a microcosm of heaven, and the interior as well as the exterior of Hindu temples have numerous heavenly celebrants performing in honor of the gods, dancing. Here, the dancer's face and body are treated according to prescribed canons of beauty. Her body is contorted in an improbable pose. So she's got a tiny little waist, very full, absolutely round, almost melon-like breasts. And she has extreme flexion in the dance position, which reflects the Karunas and Shtantas in the Natya Sastra, which is an ancient dramatic arts treatise, which we don't have time to look at in this class, but there is clear description of this kind of twisting, torquing, and extreme flexion of form and a sense of movement in treatises in India. And notice how her necklace is flying off of her body to accentuate the sense of movement. And it was understood that these extreme twisting poses, they accentuated an already exquisite beauty of a dancer, and this twisting of the body would draw out the awareness, the appreciation of that beauty even further. Here is a detail, and so just allow you to see we have the same kind of enlarged earlobes with the plugs in them. This wonderful contrast between exquisite surface detail in its high level of intricate detail, then contrasts and becomes more present to us as it is contrasted with her very smooth skin. So this use of extreme contrasts of surface texture and adornment and surface decoration versus smooth, supple skin is developed and articulated here with absolute skill and deftness. Here we have the almond-shaped eyes, the protruding lower lip. We have signs of those 3 creases in the neck, even here. A very elaborate crown with numerous snail-shaped decorative forms, stylized eyebrows. Here's a back view that really emphasizes beautifully how the accentuation of her feminine form, that small waist and the full bottom and the breasts, both of which are possible to view simultaneously front and back with this extreme twisting pose. And lastly, not lastly, but in here I just have a detail of her lower legs here. And we can see again how much detail is achieved in her jewelry that's bedecking her costume, which with actual Indian dancers would make a beautiful ringing sound with little bells and metal um, uh, striking one another as the dancer dances, so accentuating the drama of her dance. Here's probably a bell. And then here's a detail of her face. You can see this the level of form and detail of this articulated face. So with that, I thank you for um, joining me on this series of Indian art, and I look forward to reading your think pieces, reading your essay answers in your exam. If you decide you'd like to write about one of the works or are prompted to from the textbook reading or from this lecture series. Again, I do give you a study guide that means there's no surprises on my exams, and some of the material will be drawn from this series, but again, it won't be hidden away in words that I've said that I haven't either emphasized or actually written down, and for the most part written down in this series. But knowledge in our class will just move through us like water if we don't have context and feeling to link it to. And so the purpose of these videos is to educate you in the forms of Hindu uh, deities and their representation in India, but also to help you integrate what you have so far learned and connect it. And then in doing that, you're likely to retain and remember it. So I look forward to our next session where I will probably see you in the context of China.